All right, so we began with a Mother's Day game that highlighted some of the difference between men and women. So I thought we'd just kind of continue with this theme, and I'd share a little-known difference between men and women. This one was kind of discovered in 2020, although maybe some of you already knew it even before this study. But the study had 1,000 adults, 500 women, 500 men come, and they surveyed them, and they asked them to rate themselves when it came to intelligence, to rate themselves when it came to physical health, and to rate themselves when it comes to physical attractiveness. What did the research find? It found that men, we rate ourselves higher when it comes to intelligence. So when it comes to women, they don't rate themselves as high as we rate ourselves when it comes to intelligence. Men, the study also found that we rate ourselves higher when it comes to physical health, more than women rate themselves when it comes to physical health. And you probably know where this is going. Even when it comes to physical attractiveness, men, we rate ourselves higher than women rate themselves. So what are the implications of this study? Well, I think maybe there's a few. One would be when women wake up in the morning, chances are, they put themselves together with their hair and their makeup, and maybe they pick out just the right outfit. But when they leave, there is still a sense that maybe they're underdone, right? Meanwhile, what do men do when they wake up? If they're lucky, they'll take a shower. Hopefully, they'll brush their teeth. Maybe they'll comb their hair by, using their hands. And then they'll look at themselves in the mirror and say, "You handsome devil," right? Go get him, tiger, right? That's where we're at. When it comes to women, how do they enter a job interview, right? With humility and grace. Men, on the other hand, at some point in that job interview are probably thinking to themselves, "I am the smartest one in the room right now. These guys would be idiots not to hire me," right? That's probably what we're thinking of at some point. Women, maybe at the end of the day, you get a 30-minute cardio workout in, maybe a light dinner. That's how you call a day. Men, we forego the exercise and we order the greasy burger because we rationalize in our mind and we say to ourselves, well, yesterday the elevator was out at my workplace and I had to walk those 4 flights of stairs. And then even today, it was Tim's birthday, and I decided to only eat 2 cupcakes. So health-wise, I am just so good right now. Give me the burger and the fries and the shake. Now, I don't know, maybe we're stretching the implications of that study just a little bit, but one of the things that I have definitely noticed as I've talked with women and mothers over the years is there does seem to be a devaluing that takes place in the heart and the minds of so many women. I talk to mothers who devalue their input in the home because, well, they're so caught up in a career and they don't think they're giving enough time to their children. Meanwhile, I talk to stay-at-home moms who devalue what they're doing because, well, they're not contributing financially to the home. And then we've got other moms who, they devalue their parenting because, well, they're just so strict. And then I talk to another group of women who find themselves devaluing themselves because, well, they're just too lenient with their kids. And then there's guilt sometimes that women will have when it comes to, making sure that the house is perfectly spotless. They feel guilty about that. Why? Because, well, they didn't spend as much time with their husband as they thought they should. And then at the same time, maybe the wife that spent a lot of time, putting together this perfect day for their husband feels bad because there's some laundry that didn't get done and the dishes are still in the sink. And we see this devaluing that takes place. I think we see it even in the church. I've definitely seen it in the church where maybe one of the ladies has this wonderful administrative ability but feels guilty because, well, shouldn't they be working with the kids, but they can't stand kids? And so there's shouldn't I be working with the kids? And then you've got other women who, they just want to hold babies all day long. And they feel bad because, well, there's other ministry to be done. And there just seems to be this devaluing that oftentimes happens. But what do we know from Scripture? What do we see God doing in the lives of women throughout Scripture? He's constantly elevating them. He's not devaluing, he's elevating. We see these examples of this, big examples like Ruth and Esther and Mary. But then there's also women in the Bible who, they're lesser known, but they set the spiritual tone and climate of their day. Lesser known individuals like Pua, individuals like Jehoshab and Ichla. And I know you're thinking, you just made up those last 3. Those ladies are not in the Bible. I may have mispronounced their name, but they were actually in the Bible. And again, they set the spiritual tone and climate of their day. We are in a series in the book of Titus. And one of the things that is really unique about the book of Titus is it's a smaller letter written to a man named Titus, and it's all about Titus's role in the churches, the house churches on this island, island of Crete, and his task is to fix things that are broken in these churches. And how is he supposed to fix what's broken? Well, he's supposed to train up leaders. He's supposed to train up leaders who understand God's truth and are able to influence others in that truth. This is not just a male thing, though. This is also a female thing. And so today we're going to read a section of the book of Titus specifically to women. And if you're a man, you might think, well, I can check out on this. No, the principles apply, I think, just as well to men as well to women. But specifically, Titus is tasked with training up these leaders, these women leaders in the church. And so we're going to look at really several elements of when it comes to God's leadership call on the lives of women in the church. So if you haven't already, go ahead and turn to Titus chapter 2. And we're going to be starting to read in verse 3. Verse 3 begins, "Likewise, teach older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the word of God." All right, so there's a lot there, and what I'd like to do is something similar to what I did last week. If you were with us last week, I kind of gave you a list of 15 character qualities, 15 really wonderful attributes that you can live out in order to be a leader in the church. Specifically, Titus was trained to actually build up elders in the church. We're going to look at a list of 10 qualities, 10 actions that women in the church are called to live out. But what's going to be unique about today is not only are we going to look at this list of 10, but we're also going to look at how many of you ladies, and I'm going to name you by name, and we're going to have your picture on the screen. And if you're one of these ladies and your picture shows up on the screen, don't go, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe he chose that one." Chances are I just found it on Facebook, so you already posted it or a friend posted it, so blame them or blame yourself. So on one hand, like if you get used in an illustration here, like don't cringe. And at the same time, if you are one of the ladies and you don't get used in an illustration, don't walk away going, "Oh man, I should have been." Because here's the thing, you probably are living out this leadership quality really, really well, but we've got a lot of women in the church, and if you want me to release you like in a timely manner and not like by next Friday, I can't talk really great things about every single one of you. So hopefully you'll understand this. Let's go ahead and look at God's leadership call that He's placed on women in the church. Number one needs to be reverence. To be reverent in the way that you are living and conducting your life. It is Mother's Day, so let me ask you, how many of you have been positively influenced by your mother at some point in your life? Okay, most hands have gone up. I'm a little surprised that some hands remain down, but that's okay. We all have, weaknesses and strengths when it comes to parenting, and maybe that was a weakness in your life. But most of us have probably experienced some sort of positive impact by our mom somewhere along the way. I was reading a study that was done in Australia, and according to this study, 53% of Australians actually view mom as their number one influencer, meaning that who they are today is a direct impact of mom. 79%, 4 out of 5 Australians at least put mom in the top 3 of that list of most influential people. I couldn't find a study that talked about this in the United States, but I think if the study was done in the United States, the numbers would be very similar. Why? Mom's influence, mom's lead. Moms are those critical individuals in our lives who oftentimes set that foundation, not just for being a good citizen, but also set that foundation of spirituality. And this is why it is so critically important for women, whether you are a mom or not, for women to lead through reverence. Now, we looked at reverence, that word reverence, a little bit last week, and I want to draw it out just a little bit further this week and ask the question, okay, what does it look like to be reverent specifically to God? And it carries with it the idea that you are putting Him above all things because God is above all things. There's this profound respect and honor that you are giving God, and you are placing him above everything else, and everything else is such a distant two that it's not even comparable. Now, when I think of individuals in the church who are doing this really, really well, one person rises to the surface, and what's interesting is she's not even a mom. She's not even married. When I think of this who this is, who just models it so well, I think of, well, let's see the picture. You guys know who this is? Joanna Tide. Yeah. How many of you have ever heard Joanna pray before? You ever heard Joanna pray? If you've ever had the privilege of hearing Joanna pray, there's reverence. I mean, in the words that she's using, in the words that she's choosing not to use, I mean, there is just a sense of reverence where there's a deep intimacy there, but at the same time, there is a respect and there's an awe taking place. This is probably about a year and a half ago. Joanna will be super embarrassed that I'm telling the story, but I've already told it to her, so hopefully it'll be okay. One of our church members came up to me, and she was wanting to play matchmaker, and she got the idea of, this young man is really nice, and Joanna's really nice, and maybe the two of them, like they could be a couple. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't see it, but I was like, I don't know, maybe. And then this member looked at me and said, yeah, I know. Joanna just puts God above everything else, doesn't she? And I was like, yeah, no, that's what Joanna does. And isn't that just a beautiful testimony? That everything else is just a far distant number two. And isn't this the kind of person that you want teaching, training, and discipling your kids? Joanna's a leader, and she is leading our church, and she's leading our kids really well, and she's doing it through her reverence. Number 2 on the list of God's call for leadership, for women to lead in the church, is to not slander, to not slander. The Greek word here for slander is actually the word devil, which may sound a little strange, but the idea is that when you are slandering, you are behaving like the devil. So what does it mean to slander? I think maybe a really simple way to look at this is if you're in a conversation with somebody and someone else comes up in your conversation, so you start talking about someone else who's not there, if you walk away from this conversation knowing that they probably think less of this person, chances are you've slandered. If, on the other hand, that after this conversation here, they're thinking more, not less, then you're probably in a good shape. And you're probably actually leading and you're positively influencing. This is a good way to look at slander. And for me, one of the people that comes to my mind in our church who lives this out really well is, you guys know who that is? Cheryl Curd. Cheryl Curd, in the 3 years that I have been the pastor of this church, I don't think I've ever heard a negative word come out of her mouth about anyone. It's one of those things that she works with our kids in our kids ministry, and I've actually heard people, talk about how sometimes your kids can be challenging, because sometimes your kids can be challenging. Let's just throw it out there. Sometimes your kids can be a little crazy. And so someone has said something about one of the kids. You know what Cheryl does? She always spins it around in a positive way. She goes, oh, well, you know what? They're full of energy. But did you hear the question that they asked? Oh, I didn't even know how to answer that question. That was such a deep, she spins it around. I've even heard her do this with adults. Someone will make some kind of negative comment about someone else, and it always, and she kind of gets this little look on her face. Well, they're kind of going through a difficult time right now, and they're really doing a good job. Every single time, what does she do? She spins it around so that people are thinking better of others. Cheryl's a leader in our church, and she leads by making sure that the words that she's using and the words that she's not using are building others up, not tearing them down. Number 3 is don't be addicted to much wine. Again, we looked at this last week when we were looking at that list of qualities that elders have. Bottom line, what did we learn last week? We learned that when it comes to alcohol, none is fine, some is fine. What about a lot? A lot is not, right? That's where you draw the line. So my wife and I, we had this friend, and this is several years ago. She was really embarrassed because her 5-year-old kept drawing pictures of the family, which that's not embarrassing. You guys know the pictures that 5-year-olds draw, sun in the corner, a tree, stick figures holding hands, everything. But she was looking at these pictures, and every single time she looked at these pictures, she just was puzzled about her picture. And at some point, she just asked, in every single picture, you have me holding something. What is this? I said, oh, Mom, that's your wine glass. And she just asked, why are you always drawing me, painting me with a wine glass? It's because you're always drinking wine, Mom. And she realized, oh my goodness, maybe that is true. It's somewhere along the way, she went from, none is fine, some is fine, and all of a sudden a lot was what she was living her life with. And so I'm just going to assume, here's how I'm going to play this one. I'm just going to assume that that's all of you women, because I don't have one specific lady that I'm like, yes, you have sobriety under your belt. I'm not going to go there. So we're just going to assume that all of you ladies are doing really great in that area. Number four is to teach what is good. Teach what is good. What does it mean to teach what is good? I think it carries with it this idea that you are passing on the life-transforming work that Christ has done in your heart to those around you. It means that you have been so shaped by the gospel message that you cannot help but share it with others in unique ways. And we have in our church probably about 27 Jens, Jennifers, and Jennies. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight 3 of you, okay, who I believe are really just living this out really well. First one is Jenny Choir. Jenny Choir, are you hanging out right here? Yep, Jenny Choir. So Jenny Choir, have you noticed that almost every single Sunday, she doesn't come with Bruce, they drive separately, but she comes with someone else, or multiple someone else's. Do you guys know who she comes with? Her grandkids. She comes with her grandkids. Why does she bring her grandkids almost every single Sunday to church? Because she recognizes that it's this space where they're going to be touched with the gospel message. And that's the message that has transformed and changed her heart and her life, and she wants that for her grandkids. And it's not that she just did this with her grandkids, but she did it with her children, and she does it with your guys' children. She's a part of the rotation of volunteers on Wednesday night with our Kids City program, and she's leading our church well by sharing the good news with as many people as possible. Another Jen that comes to my mind is Jen Winiger back there. If you don't know Jen Winiger, you probably at least know her laugh, because she has a contagious laugh, and every once in a while I'll make a joke, and even if they're not that funny, she still comes through for me. So that's Jen. She's got this great, wonderful personality, and she's heavily involved in our community, even with our church. Her and Ron just finished going through the Financial Peace University, teaching that for 9 weeks. Just really wonderful teacher. But she probably has the best hook, the best intro to sharing the gospel message than anyone I've ever met. Here's how she throws down. Okay, so she begins, again, you got to know her personality. Just always smiley, always bubbly, and she'll say, do you want to hear the greatest, most encouraging, just the best message ever? Who's going to say no to that, by the way? The most amazing message. You want to hear the best amazing news ever? No one's going to say no to that. And so once you say yes, she's got you. You're stuck, and she's going to now share with you the gospel message. She's now going to share with you the greatest message of all time, which is the message that has transformed her life, and she shares her testimony and what God has done in her life. Isn't that brilliant? Do you want to hear the greatest news? Yeah, of course we're going to say yes. Yes, she's a leader in our church, and she's leading by sharing the good news. I've got one more for you, and this is actually Jen Gribbins. Jen Gribbins is not only doing this with her 2 boys that you see here, but she may be the most evangelistically minded person in our entire church. Don't know if you're aware of this, but she will invite anyone and everyone to church. I'll be out in the community and I'll run into her, and this has happened more times than I can count. She will say, oh, hey, and whoever she's hanging out with, I don't even, maybe they're total strangers, maybe they're friends, I don't know, but she'll just like, hey, that's my pastor, you need to come with church with us. Hey, John, you need to invite them to church. I've been telling them to come to church for like 2 years now, and she just like brings me in on it. I was like, oh, okay, my name's Jonathan, by the way. I guess you got to come to church. Like that's just who she is. And I just got to say, it's not just these ladies, but these women are leading really well, and they're leading me really well to be evangelistically brave. Like if this message, this good news has transformed our hearts and our lives as much as we say it has, then shouldn't we be sharing it, teaching it with as many people as possible? These women certainly are. Number 5 on our list is to urge other women to love their families, to love their husbands, to love their children. I heard a story about a young boy who was talking with his father, and at some point he looks at his dad seriously and he says, Dad, what does it mean to be a man? And the dad kind of gets a crooked grin on his face and he says, well, son, it means that you love and you care for and you take care of the people that mean the most to you, your family. It means that you live sacrificially. And at the end of his explanation of what it means to be a man, the son got a big smile on his face and he says, Dad, I can't wait to someday be a man just like Mommy. Isn't that so true, though? I mean, there's so many times where we look at moms and we marvel, and I think one of the reasons why we look at moms and marvel is because, personally, when I look at people who just live selfish lives, I don't know who lives a more selfish life, children or husbands. I don't know who lives more selfishly, husbands or children, but combined, it's a marvel how any woman is able to love their families as much as they do. How do they do it? I think one of the tools, particularly that we see in the church, is that it's the support of other ladies. It's the support of other women who've maybe gone before, who have gone through difficult seasons, or maybe in the process of going through a difficult season, but they're finding victory, and they come alongside other women and they encourage and they support. They bring tools and life into those dark times. And I think one of the women that comes to my mind is actually Rebecca Stevens. Rebecca Stevens came to me about 2 years ago, and she said, Jonathan, part of my story is when I was a older high school, early college student, I had some older women who stepped into my life, and they not only discipled me, but they allowed me to understand what it even means to be a woman and to be eventually a wife and a mother. And I just have a heart to do that for other women. And so, is it possible to start a women's ministry at the church? And I thought it was a great idea, and so I said, go for it. Not being a woman myself, I probably did not give her as much direction and focus as maybe I should have, but I just kind of said, go for it. And that's exactly what she's done. In the midst of raising 3 children, 1, a newborn, in the midst of being a trained and licensed therapist, in the midst of having to have that wonderful husband, she also leads our women's ministry that meets on Sundays. She also puts together outreaches and events for our women. And she's leading our church well. Why? Because she simply loves her family and she encourages and supports all of us to do the same. Number 6 on our list of God's leadership call for women in the church is to be self-controlled. So probably the seminal work that was done on self-control took place many, many decades ago through something called the Marshmallow Experiment. It's gained in a lot of popularity over the last 18 years, so you probably know. How many of you guys know what I'm talking about, even when I say the Marshmallow Experiment? Okay, if you don't, that's okay. So what they did was they took a marshmallow and they put a marshmallow in front of a child, and they said, you can enjoy this marshmallow right now. Right now, you can just go for it. Or you could wait for an unspecified amount of time and you get 2 marshmallows. Do you want to wait? You want to wait for 2 marshmallows? I mean, every kid knows 2 marshmallows is way better than 1 marshmallow, but what do they need in order to actually get the 2 marshmallows? Self-control. They have to have that delayed gratification. Here's where the research got really interesting. So they charted those children as they got older, and as they became adults, what they found is those kids that had the self-control to say, no, I'm going to wait, they were far more successful in multiple areas of life, where the kids that did not have that self-control did not find that success. This is how I articulate it and try to communicate it with my boys. There's a big difference oftentimes between what you want now and what you ultimately want. I'll tell my boys, okay, I know right now in this moment, you want to take corners when it comes to your schoolwork. You want to find shortcuts and you're not going to learn the material. That's what you want now. What do you ultimately want? You want to understand the material. You want to be able to pass the test. You want to be able to pass the class. I know right now what you want is junk food. You just want to feed your face with as much candy as you possibly can. That's what you want now. But I know you ultimately want good health. You want to be strong. I know right now you want revenge because your brothers are crazy and they deserve your wrath. That's what you want now. But what do you ultimately want, boys? You want loving relationships with your siblings. See, there's a huge difference between, oftentimes what we want now and what we ultimately want. And I think one of the ladies in our church who is living this out really well in kind of a unique way is actually Nita Basham. I don't know if you guys realize this, but Nita has 3 daughters. You probably know of at least one because she's really loud and vocal, Heather. And wonderful. But she also has a daughter who felt a call on her heart to do overseas missions. And that's exactly where God led her, and specifically led her to a part of the world that just a handful of years ago it had the highest violent crime rate in the entire world. So you can imagine, you're a mom and you're sending your daughter to a place that is violent. What do you want now? You want her to be safe. You want her to be close. On top of that, this daughter now has 2 adopted children and 1 biological child. Again, process this for a moment. If you are a mom, if you are now a grandma, who do you want closest to you? Who do you want to spend all your time with? But never once have I ever heard, in the 3 years that I've been doing ministry here, have I ever heard Nita communicate anything like that. There's never a message of, well, I can't wait till they kind of finish up that whole missions thing so they can come back here. Never once have I heard her devalue the ministry that is taking place in Honduras. Never once have I heard her even pine for, well, one day we'll all be... No, instead, what do we see in the life of Nita? There's a difference between maybe what she wants now and what she ultimately wants. What does she ultimately want? She wants the good news, the gospel, to be preached to the ends of the age, to the ends of the world. And this is how Nita is leading us really well and leading her family really well. Number 7 on the list is to be pure. God calls women in the church to be pure. What does it mean to be pure? It means to be uncontaminated. What it means is that although there might be contamination all around you, your heart is not. When you think of pure gold, what does that mean? It means it's free of contaminants. What is pure silver? Well, it's free of contaminants. How does this relate to our spiritual lives, your spiritual lives, women? You may be in dark places. You may have sin all around you. There might be evil all around you, but that does not contaminate your heart and your soul. Instead, you continue to be a pure, bright, beautiful, loving light for those who might still be in darkness. One of the women that comes to my mind is actually Judy Shepard. Judy Shepard is someone who could have retired years ago, but still walks into our school systems every single day. And if you know anything about our school system, there are some families that are coming from really dark places. She walks in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and she does not leave until 8 o'clock at night. And there's tutoring that she does even after that. And this is a woman that if you went down to Saffel Street Elementary tomorrow and you started asking the kids, hey, what do you think of Miss Shepard? What do you think of Miss Shepard? They'll tell you what they think of Miss Shepard. What do they think of Miss Shepard? They tell how much they love Miss Shepard because Miss Shepard loves them with a pure heart that has been transformed by Christ's love. See, Judy is a leader not only in our church, but she's a leader in our community, and she's leading and influencing your kids in a positive way. Number 8 on our list of God's leadership call for women in the church is to manage your household. Manage your household. Now, does this mean you have to stay at home? No, that's not what it means. In fact, we know that only 7% of moms actually are stay-at-home moms. 93% are actually working moms, and so many of them are actually single working moms. Does this mean that fathers, you get a pass? You get to sit on the couch? You're just like, manage the home. I'll go out there, and this is your territory. No, definitely not. What it means is that you are prioritizing. Actually, let me back that up. What it means is your number one priority is not ministry here in the church. I know it's crazy that a pastor would say that, but I mean it. What it means is that your number one priority is not making a name for yourself in your career. What it means is that your number one priority is not actually making a difference in the community. Your number one priority is not necessarily even a hobby. Is there anything wrong with anything that I've just listed? Of course not. But God has uniquely designed and shaped you to actually manage and help your household. What does that look like, though? Well, it probably looks differently to different situations. Does it mean that you do the grocery shopping? Maybe. Does it mean that you help your kids with homework at night? Maybe. Does it mean that you work on the car? Possibly. We all have our gifts. We all have our strengths. And what you're doing is you're stepping into your home and you're prioritizing your home, however God has gifted you. And where you're feeling a little lacking and you need some help, then it's okay to ask for help. You can ask help from family, friends, your husband, and certainly your church family. Who's doing this well? So many of you are doing this well. It's hard to narrow down. But there's only one woman that I'm aware of in our church who has raised 10 children. There's only one woman in our church who has not only raised 10 children, but cows, horses, chickens, as well as gardening and flowers, and also has world-famous cookies. And who is that? Suzanne Tide. Suzanne Tide. Suzanne Tide has managed her home well, and here's the kicker, guys. She's done it with Tony as her husband. How she needs a gold star and 1,000 smiley faces, right? But this is one of those wonderful things that not only is she leading her own children really well, managing them and seeing the wonderful fruit, whether it's Mary or Joanna or David and Caleb and all these wonderful kids that I've been able to spend my life with, but she's also doing the same with us as a church. And so we are grateful for her leadership. And then number 9 is to be kind, to be kind. Studies indicate that just being kind, having a heart of compassion, just changes actually the makeup of your brain. When you are kind, you actually become a healthier person. And you know this to be true, because isn't it true that when you actually have a selfless decision, it just makes you feel better? You walk away oh yeah, I felt good. There's something about that. This is what studies have found. It found that kindness actually limits stress. It provides a sense of belonging and improves self-esteem. It increases feelings of gratitude and it reduces depression. When I think of the top 5 kindest people that I've ever encountered, I think they're all women. Every single one of them. So there's no wonder why women oftentimes live longer than men, right? Your kindness is just keeping you healthier than men are. Your kindness is not only just keeping you healthier, but it's keeping every environment that you step into, and with your kindness, it's building greater health. Certainly we see that in our church. Who comes to my mind when I think of people who are kind? Well, I actually think of Pinky Clark. A week before Valentine's Day, I took 2 of my sons, Travis and Berkeley, over to visit Pinky. And we had some flowers that we wanted to give her. And she invited us in like only Pinky can do, big smile and, oh, I can't believe you're here, and oh, come have a seat, and just, gushing and way too much love, right? And then she shares about what's going on in her life, and she asks us about the baby and how mom's doing. And then she brings out these quilts. I think it was 3, 4, maybe 5 that she had put together and made. And she says, okay, boys, you got to choose the one that you think mom and baby would like the most. And so they go through and this one I think mom would really like. And so we get this quilt, even though she'd already given a gift to the baby and mom at the baby shower, and she just loads us up with all these wonderful things. And we enter the car after saying goodbye, and the first thing out of my son Travis's mouth was, "Pinky is so kind." And then in the back seat, Berkeley says, "Pinky is so kind." Pinky is leading not only my kids by that positive influence of kindness, but she's leading all of us as well, isn't she? Well, it is Mother's Day, and I don't think a Mother's Day message would be complete without this number 10 on the list. What does this leadership call? Submissive to husbands. Would you look at the time? Should we wrap this up with a word of prayer? Is that... So, the truth is, we've actually covered this a few times. We've actually looked at multiple scriptures at multiple different times in the 3 years that I've been here. And I think most of you who have been around any number of years, you've probably got a good handle on this. But there is a principle. There's a principle that we see in Scripture, and we see it lived out, played out in any healthy and marriage that will go the distance. What is the principle? It's not just one submission. It's not just the wives submitting to the husbands, but we see in Scripture this call for men and women, husband and wives, to have a mutual submission. But here's the deal. As I read Scripture, and I may be way wrong on this one, but as I read Scripture, it seems to me as though God is actually calling, for whatever reason, and women, I know you might go, I don't want to lead in this area, but it seems like he is calling women to lead their husbands in this area. Why? I don't know, but I do know this about myself. My own arrogance, my own pride makes it really difficult for me to respond well to ultimatums. It causes me to be really difficult just to respond to commands and people who are just pushing their agenda. But here's the deal. Anytime my wife wants me to do something, anytime my wife shares something that is important to her, you know what? I want to actually help her. I want to step in and give her what she wants. Why? Is it because she always has the really, hardcore, convincing answers? Is it because she's so headstrong? No, it's because she's leading me really well when it comes to submission. And so what does it become? It becomes a submission competition where we try to submit to one another and end up lifting each other up at the same time. Outside of my wife, I think one of the ladies in our church who lives this really well is actually Emily Doolin. I say this because Josh and Emily actually have a mission statement for their family, and one of the lines is this. It says, in a world full of criticism, we will be each other's number one fan. And they go throughout their week, and periodically they'll just ask themselves the question, who's on your team? Who's on your team? And the assumption, the understanding is they're on each other's team. That a win for Josh is a win for Emily, and a win for Emily is a win for Josh. And what we see in this mission statement is a heart for mutual submission. And so, Emily, thank you for leading not only Josh really well in this, but also our church as a whole. I want to share one more story with you, and it's a story about a girl named Anna. Anna grew up in one of those homes that looked really shiny on the outside, but was a complete mess on the inside. When Anna was 8 years old, her mother passed away. When she was 10, her father, who was an alcoholic, ended up dying. And Anna, growing up in this loss, became really socially awkward. And on top of her social awkwardness, in the eyes of most people, in the eyes of the world, she would not be considered a beautiful woman. She was one of those people who was intelligent, but because she was so awkward and just not attractive like most women are, she just found herself withdrawing. However, as she got older, she did find someone that she fell in love with. In fact, she fell in love with the man of her dreams. And in this courtship, they not only fell in love, but eventually there was a proposal and they got married. They started having kids, and it was this wonderful marriage until one day Anna found out that her husband was cheating on her. And so you can imagine just having had a father pass away, felt like he had left her. A mother who had passed away felt like she had left her. And now having a husband that rejected her, you can imagine the loss there. And you could end the story, and I could say, well, she just kind of lived a sad life, and eventually she died and went on to God's greater glory. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, Anna ended up finding her voice. Anna found God's call on her heart and her life. Anna began to realize that she had gifts and she had talents, and she began to use them to influence others. And in her day, she actually became the most famous woman in the entire world. And you probably still don't know who I'm talking about. Anna's husband eventually contracted an illness that left him partially paralyzed. And you would imagine that maybe because of his cheating ways that she might point a finger and say, well, hey, you got what you deserved. But that's not what she did. Instead, she spoke life and encouragement into her husband. And she continued to build him up and said, hey, this doesn't mean that you can't influence. It doesn't mean you can't lead. It doesn't mean that this is the end of your story. And he began to have confidence because of her confidence. And as a result, well, he became famous himself. And although many people would look at his successes and maybe give most of the credit to him, it was actually the woman. It was the wife who led the husband, who positively influenced the husband, that led a nation out of poverty, really, out of depression. It was the woman, it was the wife who led and influenced the husband that actually allowed the nation to become the most powerful nation on the planet. Who is this Anna that I'm speaking of? Well, her first name was Anna, but she liked to go by her middle name, Eleanor. You probably know what I'm talking about. This is Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt, who actually is probably the most famous woman, most influential leader of the 20th century, at least female leader of the 20th century. Ladies, I share this story with you because God has called you to lead. I share this story with you because God has called you to positively influence others. And on behalf of the church, I just want to say thank you for taking that call on your life serious. Thank you for leading our church. Thank you for leading our children. Thank you for leading our husbands, your husbands. And I just want to challenge you at the same time. I want to challenge you to continue to lead